Yes, hello everybody, and welcome back to the Wildcard Rewind. This week, we're going to be reviewing the NFC West with special guest Lewis Wood here to talk some Rams. And then we got Paul, who's going to talk in depth about everything that the Cardinals are great at too. Can't wait to get into it. Let's get going.
I just want to rewind to when we were young and back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
Oh, yes. Here we are. We are back talking some NFC West. We are very, very happy to be joined by Lewis Wood today, who's a Rams fan. You can probably see peeking at the top of his cap if you're watching on YouTube. You know, the Super Bowl champions from 2 years ago, obviously not from this year. That's the Kansas City Chiefs, as we all know. So, Lewis, what's that? 1 minute in. That's not bad for getting that in that early. Lewis, great to have you on the show. How you doing, mate?
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I think last season gets written off, and I think we should still consider the Rams the Super Bowl champions. When I was getting ready for the show beforehand, I was like, I'm gonna have to put this hat on because I just have to remind myself as we go into the mire of the next few seasons what it was and what we had, and the way things were before.
Yeah, absolutely. Just remembering fonder times, and we've also got our two regular hosts as well on here. We got Paul, who's here to talk some Cardinals. Paul, how are you today?
I'm doing really good, mate. I'm doing really good. I've been excited about this show since it was an idea that I get to talk about the Cardinals, but then I'm also pretty depressed because it's reminding me on how bad our season actually was. So can we just not talk about the disaster in the desert?
Disaster in the desert. Well, we'll got plenty of time to chat about them. Don't worry, Paul. We've made sure to put it in a nice slot in the show sheet for you. And then we've also got Hannah on as well. Hannah, not talking Bengals today, but we're going to chat. You're going to chat some Seahawks, I think, later on. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm great, thanks. I love this time of year. Free agency has started already. The deals are rolling in, and it's just so much fun, isn't it? I love seeing these pop up and seeing who's going where and who's being aggressive and who's going to be regretting it in a few months' time. So, yeah, loving it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of those kind of not quite free agency, but one of those kind of moves that has been made were to do with the team we're about to talk about, which is the Rams. And we know Jalen Ramsey, he's been moved on, and a couple of other things will be shuffled around, I'm sure, for the Rams. So Lewis is here to talk about, the good and the bad for the Rams. So why don't we just start off with, what actually went well last year? You might be thinking, oh, it's going to be a short thing, but let's start off with what went well for the Rams last year. Finished at a record of 5-12, which obviously maybe not what you're expecting after a Super Bowl victory, but so many things went wrong. But what went right for the Rams last year?
Tutu Atwell caught a really long touchdown pass. I think it was like 72 yards. And, we drafted him in the second a few years ago over Creed Humphrey. That was a real highlight of the season. That was really good. What went well last season? There was a Super Bowl parade. Does that count as the same season? It was this. It was last year. And I think that might be, we know that last season was the worst defense of a Super Bowl ever, and not one that Rams fans really saw coming. We had been spending quite a few years being mocked for this F them picks mentality and going all in and trading our picks for players and signing huge money deals, not drafting. I was going to say not drafting particularly well, which isn't actually true, but not drafting well high and not really drafting high at all a lot of the time. And then we saw, we went all in. You saw the GIF tweeted with the Von Miller trade. We're all in, and then brought it home. And everyone went, we're going to be set up to be the new dynasty of the NFL. The strategy's worked. It's paid off. It's proven a really interesting conversation over the last few months about kind of how fragile a Super Bowl win is. You'll remember the dropped Jaquiski Tartt interception in the NFC Championship game against the 49ers. If he catches that, we don't make the Super Bowl, and then it gets blown up like this, and the Rams experiment is a complete failure. So it's been a really interesting conversation about kind of how difficult it is to win a Super Bowl. We probably shouldn't have. We weren't the best team in the NFL that year. And then you've seen it blow up in our faces this year. And thankfully, we still have the ring and the banner that we can look at. And I have my hat that I can look at and wear in my sadder moments. But, you know, we've seen the fact that it wasn't sustainable. And if it didn't happen to work because of a small set of variances that happened to come off, we'd be looking at the last 5 years of the Rams really differently.
Yeah, absolutely. You kind of feel that way, I think, whenever you were seeing the players you were bringing in. Like, you know, I know quarterbacks, you bring in Stafford, who's obviously a bit older. You got Cooper Kupp, who's already a bit older. You brought in, you know, Miller, who's a bit like old. Like, these kind of guys, it was always that all in. It wasn't all in for the next 5 years. It was all in for this year, I think, really. So you got to say, I imagine you're like, no, I'd take the, you know, the records from this year, the 5-12, because we won the Super Bowl. Like, if that was the option, it's like, yeah, I'll take the Super Bowl every time.
Yep. I would take, you know, 10 to 15 years of the Rams being dreadful, especially because we were beforehand. You know, when I started following the Rams back in the Jeff Fisher days, we were pretty dreadful. You take those wins to kind of keep it going. There's a real question in the fan base about kind of how long are we now allowed to be bad for, because people are already turning, and the point being, you know, you won the ring, this is kind of what we signed up for. I think it's quite interesting as well about I think the cycle really started when we traded for Jalen Ramsey in the first place, when we sent 2 firsts to the Jags, which is mad to think that now, 3-4 years on, he's only worth a third, but it is what it is. And it's almost kind of the passing of the torch to the Dolphins, who are kind of the new team doing it now, when they trade for Jalen Ramsey to take him off our hands. You know, I wouldn't trade in last year for anything, but you know, spending a 2 and a 3 on 6 games of Von Miller, 8 games of Von Miller, was a sign that we were really going all in on the season. And it's kind of, you know, we kicked the can down the road and now we have to pay it off, and we kind of knew it was going to happen. I don't think Rams fans thought it was going to happen as bad as it did this year.
Yeah. Paul, do you have anything else to say, like, about what before we get on to what comes next for the Rams? Do you have anything to add with do you see anything else the Rams like could take as positives in this year at all?
So to me, I feel like Rams fans are quite critical of their team, when actually if you look at it, like, Matthew Stafford was not 100%. Cooper Kupp was out injured for most of the season. That's a big part of your offense gone there, you know. And that straight away, you take away them 2 players, and all of a sudden you feel like you're struggling. And I feel like people are quick to jump on it and go, "Oh, you went all in, you won the Super Bowl, now you've got nothing." But actually, it could happen to any team. You know, let's look at the Kansas City Chiefs. If they went into next season with Pat Mahomes not 100%, Travis Kelce out injured for most of the season, you kind of wonder where the points would come from on the offense side of the ball. So I feel like everyone's quite critical of the Rams, and it's a really bad defense of the Super Bowl and everything like this. And it was pretty awful, but I feel like there's a lot more to it than just, we went all in and now we're back to being a really crap team. I think you know, I'm not sure what's going to happen with Matt Stafford next year, but you know, Cooper Kupp coming back from injury, and a few key players back in there, and all of a sudden you're once again a team that is battling for the top of that division, and you're a team that's looking like they're going to make it in the playoffs. And you know, we've all seen it before, a simple run in the playoffs, and all of a sudden it's a whole different conversation we're having, you know. So I feel like people have been quite critical of the Rams and what they've done, when actually it's a few simple injuries, and that's the same in any sport, you know. So it'd be interesting to see what they do going into next season and where they take it. So I'm quite excited to see that.
The really interesting one was the O-line injuries this year and the issues that the Rams had. It was the 32nd ranked O-line by PFF across the course of the year. But it was week 12 was the first time that we managed to start the same combination of 5 that had previously started a week. So 11 different starting O-line combinations for the first 11 weeks. It wasn't so much the play that was the problem when it came down to our starting line. I think when you get to the stage that you're essentially in the locker room turning to the coordinators and the assistants going, anyone know a guard? Anyone know a guard we can bring in off the street and start against the 49ers next week? You're not really going to expect that much as a foundation for the team. So it's the sort of thing where like things can turn around relatively quickly just by a good bit of kind of regression to the mean on injury variance, which actually the Rams had really been an incredibly healthy team for the past 2 years beforehand, and I think that showed. And then suddenly, I mean, Aaron Donald was injured as well towards the end of the season, although I think he was shut down on a slight injury more so than he was kind of ruled out for the rest of the year, because what was the point in starting him other than to kind of help his sack total climb up a little bit. But yeah, like you say, Paul, you are right that like things can tick over relatively quickly if things just kind of get back towards the way they were.
Yeah, definitely agree. So what do you think then, apart from obviously a bit more luck with injuries that you're hoping, what happens next now for the Rams? Is this Ramsey trade an indication of where things are going, or are they trying to like blow things up or recruit things, or what do you think comes next for next year and beyond for the Rams?
So all of the information that you're seeing at the moment is that we're kind of considering 2023 as a lost year in terms of the season ahead to come, and resetting going into 24. So currently, and this is including the Jalen Ramsey trade, not just that, obviously Leonard Floyd was cut, and Bobby Wagner was cut as well. So the defense especially is losing pretty much everything, losing its 3 of the 4 cornerstones. Going into 2023, we are still over the cap by about 3 million. When it gets to 2024, we have 50 million in cap space, which is the most I've seen us have in a long time. The reporting currently seems to be that the aim is draft well on the defensive side to go along with some of the young core that we already have, focus more investment on the offensive side, go into 2023 with a mentality of, if we win a game, it's because we have outscored the opposition. Not that we've tried to limit how much they can score, but we are just able to score more than you because Stafford's cup is unstoppable. And then 2024, I think, is the season when we'll actually look to balance out the team a little bit more. The question is really, because obviously Sean McVay is sticking around, which is what makes me think that this isn't a full blow it up rebuild, because I think he would have taken the 250 million a year from Amazon if that was the case. I think the fact he's sticking around tells me that it's more of a retool, but like I say, I think the aim is to focus on 24, not to try and compete too much in 23. And if we do, it'll more be because the young players have developed well, rather than because we brought in these stars and of course we knew they were going to play well.
Okay, yeah, I think that could be about right. Like, just kind of see what happens next year. And then the only kind of question I have then about that, let's say it really doesn't go to plan, and next year you end up with the number 1 pick overall, things really do. Like, do you think the Rams then go, I'm taking Caleb Williams, or is Matt Stafford definitely the guy? You take Caleb Williams.
You take Caleb Williams 100%. And there's a significant amount of the fan base that wants us to tank for Caleb Williams. The problem is you would get to the point where, so if we finish with the number 1 overall pick next year, Aaron Donald retires, Stafford probably retires. He's not that old, not compared to, the Brady's and Rodgers of the world, but he has been so beaten up that you can understand he won his ring and he wants to call it a day. The problem is you wouldn't have too much of them build around. It would depend if Cup was sticking around. I think he'd be 30 or 31 going into the start of the 2024 season. So you keep him for a few years, but you'd have to rebuild the whole of the core then. I can't see Stafford being the quarterback of the Rams longer than another couple of years. Just because, he's not a mobile quarterback. He has an incredibly powerful arm and the ability to kind of make throws out of nothing. Lots of different arm angles. I think once the arm strength starts to drop off, which is going to happen at some point in the next few years, I think we'll see kind of the downfall of Matthew Stafford quite quickly. I
Mm.
think he'll start to drop off, and then you'll go, oh, this isn't a starting quarterback anymore. So I think we'll probably have a new quarterback in the next couple of years. But yeah, I think there's a lot of Rams fans that want Caleb Williams or Drake May, but probably Caleb Williams, given that he's in California as well. I think you have a lot of Rams fans that want to see him be the quarterback of the future. Although I think you have kind of 25 teams in the NFL that want to see him as their quarterback of the future. So
it's going to be hard to lose a game next year. Everyone just trying to tag for Williams. I think they're all excellent points. So Hannah, what do you think for next year and beyond for the Rams? What do you see them needing to do, or what do you think they're going to do?
Yeah, I mean, I think Lewis has covered most of the things that I was going to say. I think he's gone through it pretty well. For me personally, I do question whether this already might be the start of the downfall of Matt Stafford.
Yeah,
obviously he had massive issues with his elbow last season, and I think there have been reports in that actually it was even worse than what was reported and what we all thought it was. And at some points he could barely even throw the ball. And I just wonder how much has he come back from that? Have there been some permanent changes in his ability to throw the ball, how he has been used to? There have been rumours that they're trying to shop him. I can't imagine anyone else wanting to take him based on obviously that recent injury and everything. So I do just wonder already whether we're starting to see the downfall of Matt Stafford. Obviously, he's been a fabulous quarterback in the league. He did some really great things, managed to win the Rams the Super Bowl. But I suspect that they're starting to kind of plan ahead and think. I personally would be surprised if Matt Stafford is still the quarterback of the Rams in 2024. I might be totally wrong. He might come out bowling this year, and carry on for, another couple of years. But if he is going to do that, they do need to sort out their O-line. Now, it might just be actually getting some of the starters healthy. I think they really, really missed the ex-Bengal player. Now, I can't remember his name, left tackle. Andrew Whitworth. I think they've really, really missed him last year. Yeah. It's amazing how well he was playing at his age still. And I think that was a massive loss to them. And I don't think they really managed to sort that out even when kind of there were healthy players there. So I think they need to really look at least the left tackle position, but I think certainly a number of positions on the O-line. And of course, as we said, they need to get everyone healthy again. I do agree with Paul that I think if everyone had stayed healthy, they would nowhere near have been as bad as they were this season. I don't necessarily think that they would have been like full-on contenders because of the issues, with some of that O-line. I think even when they were healthy, I don't think they were fabulous. But I certainly think they would have won a lot more games. I think they need to start building for 2024, to be honest. I think they need to build up a young core again. These veterans are going to age out quickly. Yeah. I don't think that Aaron Donald's going to be here that much longer, especially if they are starting to not do particularly well. I suspect he'll retire or maybe try and move on, but I think most likely he'll retire. So they need to really just start building up more of that young core again, don't they? So I think, like Lewis said, this may be a bit of a lost season. They cobble it together with Stafford, see what he can do, and then obviously make plans from next year. I mean, it'd be amazing, wouldn't it, for the Rams? They have their first round pick for many, many years, and it ends up being the 101. It'd just be classic, wouldn't it? So we'll see what happens. But, I think... Yes, I think their fall was more drastic than it probably should and could have been. But I do think they are in a little bit of a kind of no man's land at this point, and they need to kind of find their way again.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on. It's going to be interesting to see what direction they go. And it seems to be loose. I think it's more going to be a retooling than a full blow the whole thing up. And that would make sense as well. And 24 is meant to be, a good class to do that in. So, the future's Future's looking up if they get those little pinpoints along the way correct. So before we move on,
one more thing I want to say, Mag. Sorry, it's just I forgot to say it. Sean McVay, for all intents and purposes, as far as the reporting has gone, is that he was pretty much checked out last season, and I think it will make a massive difference to have an engaged Sean McVay in the building. I think they need him to be engaged and on top of things to motivate them, especially when they're kind of in this in-between period. I think if he's not there out motivating everyone, they probably quite easily tank. But I think if he's there kind of showing that he's back in and all in, then I think the players are going to play hard for him and, potentially they'll have a better season. Sorry.
There's a really interesting article by Jordan Rodrigue of The Athletic, who is the best Rams reporter by far, who basically talks about McVay's infectious energy and the fact that what he has been able to do in the few seasons beforehand is because he's such an infectious character that when he's hyped up, you've seen I think it was in the Bucks game, where they score a touchdown and he's high-fiving people off and he's dapping everyone up and everyone's going mad for him. But the flip side of it works, that when McVay started to struggle, and he said he went through a real period of depression around that kind of the inability to work things out. I think that kind of boy genius mentality that he now can't figure it out and really struggled with that. The rest of the locker room just fell apart when you suddenly had his infectious energy being a negative infectious energy. No one else really knew how to function without him. So I think you're spot on with that, Hannah. Yeah,
that's interesting. Obviously, he's still like a young guy as well. So you think maybe he'll learn from that going forward. And if that happens again, he's not going to, rub that off on his locker room as much. But yeah, McVay definitely got to be happy with him in charge, even with whatever record you have. I think that guy's obviously knows what he's talking about, so he's going to take the team places for sure if you give him time, or if he wants time, So before we move on to the Cardinals, we're going to chat about two things. One, make a prediction about, do we think the Rams will improve on their 5-12 record next year or do a little bit worse? And then who do you think the MVP for the Rams will be? Lewis, we'll go to you first.
I think we'll improve on our record. I don't think it will be by a lot. I think you're kind of looking at without being too optimistic and saying, because it's worth keeping in mind that a healthy Stafford and Cup on offense and a healthy Aaron Donald on defense can win games on their own. I think you're looking at kind of a 7 or 8 win season next year before properly retooling going into the year after. So I do think we improve on our record, but not a huge amount. In terms of MVP, it would be very easy to say Cup, Stafford or Donald, which is why I don't think I'm going to. I think, and this is a whole different question about kind of defensive players, I think Aaron Donald is the MVP of the NFL whenever he steps onto the football field. I think looking at someone like, those kind of young developmental players that I spoke about on defense earlier, so two of them in particular, Kobe Durant and Robert Rochelle, Robert Rochelle and Darian Kendrick probably. Robert Rochelle is a young corner who we drafted a couple of years ago, who the staff really, really like. It's one of the reasons that young cornerback core is one of the reasons that they're actually happy to move on from Ramsey, because they do think that they've got some developmental prospects there. So I'll say Robert Rochelle in the CB1 role next year for the MVP for the Rams.
Love that. That's fantastic. I have to keep an eye out for him next year for sure. Paul, what do you think? Are they going to improve, going to get worse? And who's the MVP going to be?
So I agree with what Lewis said. I think they will improve. And that was because I think a lot of injuries last year. And I think they get them back together. Yeah, I know they're trying to rebuild, but I still think that they're an okay team to go and get 6-7 wins in a season, And my MVP will be Matt Stafford. I reckon he's back, and I reckon he's playing for another contract. I think he's going, I'm still here. I've still got it. Pay me some more money.
Ooh, love it. Yeah. Hannah, what do you think?
I actually find this really difficult because I can see them going either way. I think if Stafford just is struggling to play, then they're going to bomb. I think Stafford, as we've all said, if he's healthy and Cup's healthy, then they're going to stay in games, and they're going to manage to win. They're going to beat the Cardinals twice, aren't they? So, that's 2 games. They're easy. So I will say I'll say they will improve slightly. I'm going to go for the cop-out MVP pick. Unlike Lewis, I am going to say Aaron Donald, because I do think, not actually necessarily from the football side, but from like a leadership, side, he's going to need to step up now and show kind of these new younger players, this is how we play here. This is what we need to do. We need to start building our defense, and playing hard. So I'm going to say Aaron Donald, and as I say, not necessarily just for the football side.
Yeah, I like that pick, Hannah, for sure. So mine's kind of with the caveat that I was kind of thinking the Rams are going to try and blow it up, obviously, with that Ramsey trade. And it's like, are more people going to follow? So I think if they are going to do that, I could see the record getting worse. But, Lewis, you kind of changed my mind a little bit. And I think it's more of a retooling. So I'm going to change my answer. I'm actually going to, I think you were talking a lot of sense there. So I'm going to change. I'm going to say, I think they will improve. I think the MVP is going to be Cooper Kupp. Mainly because Cooper Kupp was robbed of the MVP 2 years ago. Can we just say that out loud? Aaron Rodgers winning the MVP for his kind of okay season. Cooper Kupp deserved that, right? And that needs to be known. Isn't that right, Lewis?
I couldn't agree more. The MVP is a stupid award.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Cooper Kupp deserved it. So he's our MVP for that year. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes for last year, but 2 years ago, we'll give it to Cooper Kupp. Right, Paul, Cardinals. 4-13. Wow. Obviously our favorite stat from the Super Bowl preview show, and now I post it, is the Kansas City Chiefs won more games in your home stadium than your team did last year, which is absolutely fantastic. So let's start off right. What went well last year then?
So I don't want to sit here and sound like Lewis by going, what didn't go well? Cliff Kingsbury got sacked. and Steve Keem left the team. And
yeah,
that's about it, to be honest. Not much else happened. It was awful on all sides of the ball. Awful on all sides of the ball. And I don't want to sit here and try and find something that I can talk about that went well, because actually nothing went well. Nothing. But what went bad? Sorry.
Went bad? Does anyone have anything they thought went well for the Cardinals last year? I've got one thing, I think. I thought you may have found a potential star with Isaiah Simmons. I think he looked really, really good. I think that would be your kind of...
Oh, yeah.
That would be the thing I would pinpoint more than anything else. I think he looked really good last year, so he could be a guy going forward that you can really rely on. But yeah, apart from that, it's kind of slim pickings.
I still think he's got a lot to learn, though.
Mm-hmm.
I think he has his moments where you're like, I can see how good you are, but he also has his moments where you're like, dude, what were you thinking? He shows that lack of experience sometimes, and I think he has got the potential to be a great linebacker, but he still needs somebody to put their arm around him and go, come on, mate, let's show you the right way.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get... Sorry, Lewis.
I was going to say, which I think Jonathan Gannon can do. I think that's a lot of the reason for bringing Gannon in is looking at the stars on the team and looking at Isaiah Simmons and going, we need someone that can develop you.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
100%.
Paul, let's get into the bit that people want to hear. What happens next then for the Cardinals? You call for Cliff Kingsbury gone, I think, before game 1 last year. He's gone now. What happens next?
So again, I don't want to sound like I'm repeating what we were saying about the Rams, but the Cardinals need to write off 2023. Okay. I'm seeing so many different reports about Kyler and what's going on with him. Some people are saying he's going to be back and ready for week 1. I don't think he is, personally. I think that would be too quick of a turnaround. And then to put him behind one of the worst O-lines. I know we haven't had the draft yet, but at the moment we've got one of the worst O-lines. To put somebody who's going to be rushed back from an injury there and try and get something out of him, I think we need to just accept that 2023 is going to be a loss year for us, and we need to be looking to 2024. We've improved in so many places. We've brought in, as Lewis mentioned, John Gannon, who has brought in a new offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator. I'm a bit worried about them because they're unproven in that, but he's got his reasons for bringing them in. We've brought in a new GM, which is Monty Ossenfort, who's come from the Titans. He was the director of player personnel at Titans and quite well respected. So I'm happy with both of them. Hopefully we can look to the draft now, and we've got some quite wise men from what I'm reading that can lead us down the right path. What we need to do now is we actually, and I don't want to say this, but we actually need to trade away DeAndre Hopkins. He's somebody that holds value, and he, if we're looking to 2024, DeAndre Hopkins is not the wide receiver that we want in 2024. He's not, he's going to be, I think he'll be 31, nearly 32 then. And yes, wide receivers can still do it, but they're not going to be that elite number one at that point, So I think we could trade him away. I have seen people say that he is worth a first, but I don't think he is. I think I'd be quite happy to take a second, but I still don't think we'll get a second.
No.
But,
well, think about Jalen Ramsey was a third, right?
Yeah. So all I'm going off is what I'm hearing people write in the Cardinals sort of sector. People are saying, "Oh, he's a first. He's definitely not." I'd like a second for him, but I can't see us getting a second. We'd probably be realistic with a third, like you were saying about what's happened with Jalen Ramsey. But yes, we need to trade him. We need to go into this draft and actually pick at the 103. I'm seeing a lot of people say we need to trade out, and I was one of them people. I will say, I was one of these that was gone. Do you know what? Let's trade away the 103. Somebody will want to come and get a QB. Some team will pay an absolute haul for him. But actually, I'm looking, and after the trade that went down this week with the Panthers and the Bears, and now the Panthers are at the 101. So they're definitely going QB, and the Texans are going QB. Now that leaves us with anyone else. We can literally pick the best player in this draft that's not QB. Yeah. And, this is quite a luxury having that, knowing that we don't need to go QB. We don't need to be this team that's battling for the Bryce Young or the CJ Stroud or something like that. So, I quite would like us to take that pick. We could potentially get an elite player in like Jalen Carter or Will Anderson Jr. I'd be quite happy if either one of them was the name that was called out, and that's a pick that can change our whole team. Like, you know what I mean? That's just such a phenomenal player and an elite player. So I think coming into the draft, we need to look at what we can do in that sense, and what we need to do in free agency. But actually, from what's going on today, I wanted to take a veteran QB or something that could come in and be an upgrade from I can't pronounce his name. Trey McSorley and Colt McCoy. They were the two that we had last year, wasn't it? I know we're writing it off, but you want something a little bit better. But actually looking at the QB market and who's going where in today's free agency, I kind of think that Colt McCoy is our guy, and we're just going to have to ride that Colt McCoy. So to agree with what Hannah said to you, Lewis, about the Rams, you may have two very easy wins against Colt McCoy this year on heading your way. But yeah, sorry for my little rant.
No, like Cracker, like Lewis, what do you think about that? You think that's right on the money? Is that what the Cardinals are needing to do? Just kind of get rid of Hopkins and start building from, like, I think I said, Paul, a few weeks ago, it's like the Cardinals are going to draft Will Anderson Jr. and you're going to love him. Like that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think Paul's absolutely spot on with that, and I do want to say there's always a kind of a joke on NFC West communities that it's kind of a little bit of a cycle, rock, paper, scissors thing in the NFC West, that the Rams always beat the Seahawks, doesn't matter how good you are, and the Seahawks always beat the 49ers, and the 49ers always beat the Rams, and all three of them always beat the Cardinals. But
Paul left the group.
I think, I mean,
look at that. That's brilliant, right?
I do think the only way, so I think potentially an opportunity in the draft, and obviously being draft season at the moment, is to drum up a market for the number 3 pick to convince the Colts that they have to move up with you. So if you can convince them that you're working a deal with the Raiders or the Falcons or whoever it is, just to pick up an extra third or something and still control the draft from that standpoint, I think it's going to be Will Anderson. I think the Jalen Carter legal stuff has kind of complicated matters between the two of them, and we have no idea what's going on there. Will Anderson is an unbelievable player, and I am very upset about the fact that I looked immediately and I thought Seahawks at 5, Cards at 3, Will Anderson and Jalen Carter are both coming in division. Who knows at this point? But I think Will Anderson is a franchise-changing defensive player. And that, I think, is kind of the crucial thing. Is kind of finding those cornerstones. I mean, you're in an interesting position of kind of rebuilding with the QB of the future on the roster. I think trading away Nuke and obviously JJ Watt retiring is a way to kind of help the team get younger and build around a core. But there are some studs in there. There are some really talented players. Obviously, we mentioned Isaiah Simmons. I think Hollywood Brown's a good player. I don't think he's a wide receiver 1. I still think you'll need to find that somewhere, but I think he's really good. I think Buda Baker's really, really strong player. I think you've got some real gems that you can build around. It's just a really interesting thing where you need an offense that maximizes Kyler's talents. He's kind of, you need to build an offense for him in the same way that people have said about Lamar a lot of the time. And I think more so with Kyler because he's a completely unique quarterback in terms of the things he can do and the things he can't do. So I think you need to kind of really build with him in mind. But I completely agree with you. I think things are going to be looking up. I agree with you that I don't think people should be expecting to see Kyler before about week 10. And I think it would be wrong to. I think you'd be putting him in risk of further injury. So kind of similar that 2023, I think, is a write-off year. But if you get Will Anderson in the door, another potential high pick the year afterwards, and then I think you're pretty golden to compete the year after that if things kind of develop in the way you want them to.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'm back in my mind. I'm thinking. You obviously said we're not going to take a quarterback. Obviously not in the first. I am half wondering: do the Cardinals go out and get like a guy like Dorian Thompson-Robinson or some kind of like mobile-ish quarterback like later on in the draft where you can kind of build him up as like a guy you're happy to step in because Kyler gets hurt a lot and you're not going to be happy with Colt McCoy the whole time. So I'm wondering if you do take a quarterback in those later rounds, someone like that is kind of mobile and not quite in the mold of Kyler Murray, but can do some of the things he can. So yeah, I think I'll be interested. And let's move on to our question then, Paul. Do you think the Cardinals are going to do better or worse? And who's the MVP going to be?
I literally don't want to answer this question. I don't want to answer this question because if I say no, we get worse, then I'm literally subsiding to the fact that we're going to have like 1, maybe 2 wins next year. If I say it's going to be more, then I'm living on a hope that we're going to actually win more, and we're probably not going to win more. So I don't want to answer this question. So can I say maybe?
Just the exact same.
But yeah, so like, okay. I will commit and I will say that we have a better season next year. I feel like we'll have maybe 1 more win, and that'll be at home. So we don't look at embarrassment and have less wins than the Chiefs here or something like that, And my MVP for next year will be James Conner.
Oh, okay. I like it. Hannah, what do you think?
So, sorry, Paul, but I think of course I can do worse. The problem with Kyler is, so Joe Burrow came back from an ACL tear, and it took him a good number of weeks to kind of look like himself. Problem with Kyler is he's a really mobile quarterback. So he's not a pocket passer. like Joe Burrow is and can be. Joe Burrow can use his legs, but Kyler is just the total opposite. He runs around everywhere, and I just don't think he's going to be able to do that for a good period of the season, even if he's back. So I think they are going to really struggle. But I do think there'll be promise in there in terms of, I think coaching will certainly have improved. And in terms of who is going to be my MVP, okay, I'm going to say Buda Baker. Again, I think they've had quite a few aging veterans that have retired or, kind of aging out. And he needs to kind of, again, show new people coming in, etc., leadership, and they need to start playing a bit better on defense. So he needs to kind of lead from the front there.
Yeah, I love it. Lewis, what do you think?
I think I'm going to have a better record just because I can't go into the season for any franchise saying you're going to win 3 or less games. It doesn't matter how bad a team is. I just think variance means that you'll pull the wins out of somewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up being about the same, but I think he'll win more games. In terms of MVP, I actually was thinking James Conner as well, just because I think he's going to have to be, because I think he can shoulder the workload, and you're going to have to run a hell of a lot just to get yardage somewhere. If I'm going a different way, and I know he's not on the team yet, but it seems like he's going to be, I just have to say Will Anderson. I think he's going to be like the lightning rod that really brings the Cardinals franchise hope. Wait now to see the trade that they've traded out at number 3 and they don't end up getting him. But if he is on the team, I think Will Anderson.
Nice. I was gonna steal that Will Anderson line as well. I think that's a great shot if he ends up on the team. But yeah, I'm gonna say, because of the Kyler injury, not sure if he's going to be back, what's going to happen. I think he might end up being worse. But yeah, you're right. It's hard to predict a team, being worse than the Cardinals were this year, getting less wins up. But I think it's definitely possible. And I think he's going to pull it together, Paul. I'm going to go Isaiah Simmons. I think he's going to have a monster year next year. Hopefully, that new coaching staff can really help him along the way, and that'll be massive for them to build around, players like him and, perhaps Will Anderson Jr. So we'll move on now to our third team, which is the Seahawks. Great year for them, finishing 9-8, even though, some people among us predicted them to be the worst team in the NFL. Isn't that right, Paul?
Nope, not me. No, not me.
So obviously lots went right for them, Hannah. What do you think went so well for the Seahawks last year?
Yeah, well, last offseason, nobody apart from Pete Carroll thought that the Seahawks were going to be any good at all. Yeah. He was adamant that Geno and Drew Lock were his QBs. They're both QB1s. They were going to have a fantastic season. And, we all kind of sat there laughing and saying, this is never going to happen. They've got 2 backups. They're going to be terrible. And they managed to pull it out the bag. And I think that team played really, really hard, and it showed. And I think Pete Carroll showed what a great coach he is. As I say, there was lots of speculation. They're going to be rubbish. And he coached them really, really hard. And we saw how well a lot of these young rookies came, on for them through the year. Well, I'll discuss it a bit more in a minute. But, I think he did a great job of coaching that team. It was really, really helped, wasn't it, by Geno Smith basically playing the best season of his career. He was actually ended up being 7th in ESPN's QBR rating for the 2022 season. And that was higher than a lot of QBs like Joe Burrow, even in their stats. Nobody expected him to play as he did. I thought he played amazingly well. And of course, they smashed the 2022 draft. They came away with 2 good starting offensive tackles. Kenneth Gainwell, a stud running back. Yeah. And then obviously Tariq Woolen in the 5th round, who is a awesome cornerback.
Yeah.
And so it just shows how great drafting can make a massive difference to your team, overnight, basically. Adding those pieces and them playing well for you really makes a massive difference for your team, and that showed. So I just think everything kind of came together for them in a season that we thought it wouldn't. And it was kind of like this perfect storm. Gino played amazingly, their rookies played amazingly, and everything just seemed to, okay, they weren't perfect, but everything seemed to kind of come together enough for them to make it into the playoffs. My suspicion, we're obviously not here yet, but my suspicion is that there's going to be some regression next season. But I think, as I say, it kind of all just seemed to come together enough for them to be in those, those low playoff spots. Yeah, they kind of, did pretty terrible in the playoff game, but the fact that they even got there was way more than any of us would have ever predicted, right, Paul?
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, absolutely. Hannah, spot on. Lewis, what do you think? What do you think went well then for the Seahawks last year?
Hannah's absolutely nailed it. It's the draft class which really turned things around, and it's really reminiscent of kind of the hallowed 2017 Saints draft, which was Marshawn Lattimore, Ryan Ramchick, Marcus Williams, Alvin Kamara. That kind of, they absolutely turned things around overnight. And yeah, no one absolutely saw this coming from the Seahawks. I think people were really talking about them being in the sweepstakes for the first overall pick this year. It wasn't just you, Paul. It was plenty of other people as well, and they just really managed to turn things around. I'm intrigued going into next year because Gino down the stretch didn't play as well as he did throughout kind of the first 10 games of the season. And Gino's story is incredible, and it's one that we haven't really seen all that often. I worry that it was kind of flash in the pan and that this isn't who he is as a quarterback. I'm not saying that that's what I think is the case. I worry that it could be the case. And obviously everything went fantastically last year. But I think having a weaker NFC West than we thought they were going to have helped them get a couple of those wins. And so I think there's a world in which it doesn't continue going in the same way going forwards. That said, they are set up really, really nicely for it to keep the same going forwards. They've got the 5th overall pick. They've got another first as well. They've got, an incredible offensive core and the potential to where they are positioned in their second first round pick. People are mocking JSN there or Jordan Addison there, and they've got the potential to kind of really keep this young core going. And as we've been saying, not to kind of harp on about the Rams again, but we were talking about kind of the issue when you're building around a core that's an older core. Well, their core is younger. So they can develop and they can keep this going on for longer. I'm just intrigued to know how big of a part of that future Geno Smith's going to be.
If he is there at pick 5 they have, there is no way they don't take Anthony Richardson. No way. You can't. Think about Pete Carroll looking at Anthony Richardson, the way he plays. It's like a running back. Like Pete Carroll loves running backs. Like, for that guy in a quarterback, I think he will, and it's a perfect spot for him as well, because he can sit for a year and watch Geno play and learn so much, and then come in, and then then you're looking at Seahawks, Super Bowl contenders with that young core. Plus, if Anthony Richardson hits, forget about it, right?
I think you'd be stupid to not. I think if you don't have the franchise guy, if you don't have your Mahomes, your Burrow, your Herbert, your Allen, you have to keep taking shots until you're confident that you do, because I just think you're rarely going to win a Super Bowl with kind of your Kirk Cousins of the world, which I think is the kind of tier that Geno's in. They are unlikely to find themselves drafting at 5th overall again, and the problem is you end up in this middling tier where you can never actually get to that upper echelon of QB. You have to take the shot, because what's the point in not?
Yeah, absolutely. So hopefully, they can do that. That'll be a very fun move for them. And Hannah, what do you think they need to work on then for next year?
Yeah, I mean, next year specifically, I think it has to be defense, right? I mean, They were 26 in total yards allowed last season. Their pass defense was actually pretty good. They were 14th there in pass yards allowed, but their run defense was terrible. They were 30th in run yards allowed per game. So I think it all comes down personally to the D-line. I think they need to kind of get some reinforcements there. They need to build it up. They need to get some studs there. In terms of kind of QB and what we've just been discussing, I kind of agree with Lewis there in that if they're building up this roster, and they're putting good players in there, it's highly unlikely that they will be this high in the draft going forward. Gino, as much as he's been great, as Lewis has said, he isn't a stud. They've given him ultimately, I think it's a 2-year contract. He plays pretty good for those 2 years. You're not in the position to draft a QB. What are you going to do in 2 years' time? I think you have to go for it. Even if Gino plays amazingly, it's better to have, what shall we do at QB issue than a no QB issue. So I think they have to go for it. I do think they might not, though. I have a feeling that they are not going to do it, but I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. This is kind of the excitement of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I do think kind of, again, as you said, they need to look for that reliable wide receiver 3, don't they, behind, Lockett and DK Metcalf, because it's been a bit of a revolving door there, and I think that would help them, just having that reliable kind of third guy there as well. So I think, as we've said, it's going to be a really interesting offseason for them, and next season I'm really intrigued to see kind of where they go and what they do. And because they have all these draft picks, there's so many kind of pick your kind of choice, options. So looking forward to speaking about them after the draft as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Hannah, let's put you on the spot then. Are they going to do better or worse next year? And then who's their MVP going to be?
This is a tough one, but I think I might say worse, I just think Gino might have a bit of a dip. And I think, they're probably not going to quite manage as well. I might be eating my words after this, but I'm going to say not quite as good. My MVP. Okay. Ultimately, I think that, this is a tough one. I think if they're going to do well, it has to be Gino, right? He has to play as well or better than he played last season. So he has to be the MVP for them to keep going and running as well as this. If he doesn't play as well, I think they're not going to do as well. So I'm going to say Gino.
Okay, love it. Paul?
I think they do worse. And I think DK's their stud.
Okay, like it.
MVP.
Lewis?
I think worse, but I think you could convince me that they were within one win either way of where they are now. When we're talking about kind of the needs them going forwards, and we're talking about a big need being wide receiver 3. If your biggest need is wide receiver 3, you're pretty well set up. That's a pretty exciting place to be. But I'm going to say worse, but not by a huge amount. I think they're kind of in that fringe playoff contention for the next few years. I think Kenneth Walker probably MVP. I loved what I saw from him in the majority of the season that he played. Obviously, he missed a little bit through injury, and he didn't start until Rashard Penny got injured, which Rashard Penny likes to do.
Yes.
I think he's an absolute young stud. So I think, Kenny Walker for me.
Nice. I'm going to say they do a little bit better just because they're such a young team. And there's a lot of players that are so much to grow still. So I'm going to say they're going to do better. Probably not much better. I think you're right, Lewis. Probably one win either way is its the most likely outcome. MVP, I'm going to go Tariq Woolen because I just love that guy. I think he's so much fun to watch. And I think he could just take a massive step forward and become cement himself into that elite tier of quarterbacks next year. So that'd be great to see. So let's move on to our last team. I'm going to chat a little bit about the 49ers. Not too much to say about the 49ers, really. They were 13-4. They're just an awesome football team. Everywhere you look, we've talked about this whole time about you need players that scare other teams. And the 49ers are a team filled like to the brim on both sides of the ball with players that scare you. I mean, their biggest issue, and for some reason people keep making this out to be a negative thing, like they need to figure out what they're doing at quarterbacks. Like, oh no, like they've got a choice between two really good options. Like, yeah, it's great. Like most teams don't have that. And then they also have then got a plan B that they can fall back on. So I don't see this Purdy Lance thing as a negative thing at all. It's been weirdly construed as that. That's a huge win for a franchise, having two quarterbacks who either of them could lead the franchise forward. That's brilliant.
Can I just say something super quick? I'm sorry I'm butting in.
Of course.
No, I just think in theory it is brilliant, but one, Lance has not showed anything in the NFL yet, and two, Purdy has been injured. So ultimately, you know, it was brilliant before everyone was injured, but now that everyone's injured, not so brilliant anymore, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, obviously, if they're not fit and healthy coming into next year, and obviously Jimmy Garoppolo no longer there as well, that is a problem. But I think Purdy should be ready, right? Lance, not sure on Lance, but I think they're going to be happy with whoever they choose there. I think one of those two going forward will be their sort of long term. I think my money would be on Brock Purdy from what I've seen, because Trey Lance has played 1 year of football since high school, so that's not great. So my money will be on Purdy for sure. And in terms of what they need to fix, I think it's just get a bit luckier. They had so many injury problems last year that it kind of, like in that championship game, you're like, oh man, it's so unlucky that they had quarterback down. Like their fourth string quarterback is injured. I mean, that's just really unlucky. They need to wrap up the Nick Bosa contract next year as well, get that sorted. He had almost half of their sacks for the total team last year, so you'd think hopefully someone else can come in and contribute a bit more on the sack front as well. But yeah, it's hard to pick holes in this team, and I think they're actually going to go better next year. That's my early prediction. I think they'll go better. They'll have a better record. I think their MVP is going to be, Nick Bosa, right? You got to say Nick Bosa. I think they're going to get to the Super Bowl and lose to the Kansas City Chiefs. So that's my prediction. So we got just a few minutes left then. So let's quickly get your answer, Lewis. Do you think they'll be better or worse than who's their MVP going to be?
I think they'll be worse. I think we've had an interesting moment where everyone spent years saying Kyle Shanahan could lead any quarterback to success, and they spent 3 first-round picks on one. And the reality is, any quarterback can lead them to success. I don't think Brock Purdy's actually very good, but I just think anyone can thrive in that system. I think they'll be a little bit worse next year because I think their competition will be a little bit better. I think that's quite a big thing around them. It's quite hard to look past Nick Bosa, but I'm going to say Trent Williams because it's nice as a big guy myself to get some love to the big boys. They never really see it. Trent Williams probably should have been Offensive Player of the Year this year, but O-line can't win awards, and he's the best left tackle in the league. So Trent Williams.
Correct. Yeah, love that pick for Trent Williams. Hannah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think they're going to be worse. I'm not convinced that Brock Purdy is going to be able to throw well enough by the start of the season. And I just think Trey Lance is not really the QB design for this system, personally. So I think they're going to struggle a bit. So I think they're going to need CMC to step up, do some running, do some catching, help out a bit. So I'm going to say CMC for MVP.
Love it. Paul?
Like you said with the Cardinals, it's hard to predict a team that are going to get like 3 wins or less. It's hard to predict a team that are going to go into next season and get 13 wins. So I'm going to have to say they're worse, and I think their MVP will be CMC.
Love it. And guys, that brings us to the end of the show. I just want to thank Lewis again for coming on. Lewis, do you want to just tell everyone listening where can they find you online?
I'm on Twitter at LewisWoodFF_UK. I write for King Fantasy Sports. I haven't been too much recently because I have a new job and I've been very busy, but there will be more stuff coming in relatively soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And just everyone listening, thanks again. Remember, you can find us at the Wildcard Rewind on Twitter or searching for the Fantasy Wildcard Podcast Network over on YouTube, where you can get all the Dynasty content as well. So, guys, that was absolutely brilliant. Pleasure talking to everyone again. And we'll see you next week where we're continuing rounding up some divisional hits, misses. What's coming next? Who knows? We'll see you next time. Bye.